Hello there.
General Kenobi.
I'm Wes, and welcome to West B. Summer Suppers return this week on Wednesday, July 10th at 6:15 p.m. in the Fellowship Hall. The remaining suppers are on July 17th, the 24th, and the 31st. Check out what's cooking at menu.westb.org. Hope to see you there. On July 27th, we'll be hosting local businesses and agencies to bless over 100 kids and their families that need just a little extra help. We'll be sharing resources and the gospel with families that day. We need your help to make this day a success. To volunteer for this special day, go to dayforhope.westb.org and sign up. Ready to take the next step? You are invited to join us for dinner on Sunday, July 21st at 5 p.m. in the Fellowship Hall to learn about our vision, beliefs, expectations, and membership process. Additionally, we'll explore ways you can serve through our ministries at the church. Childcare will be available. Reserve your spot at connect.westb.org. Well, that's it for now. Let's worship together.
Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Upon your love, it is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. I will build my life upon your love. It is
Hello, church. It is great to be together today. My name is Kent. I am the student pastor here at West B. Since Sam is out on vacation, I have yet another opportunity to share this morning, and so I am just really excited to be together. As you just saw in that video, we are in the middle of a series on the mountains of the Bible that we have called What Faith Moves. And I love that title because it implies something that should be obvious, but that is probably forgotten really often. It's this idea that faith has power. Real faith, rightly placed faith in Jesus Christ has power not only to transform our own lives, but also the world around us. In Matthew 17, Jesus said, "If you had faith even the size of a mustard seed, you could say to this mountain, 'Move,' and it would move." And when he spoke those words to his disciples over 2,000 years ago, I think he really meant them. I believe every word that came out of Jesus' mouth was actually true. Now, does that mean that all of our prayers will be answered in just the way that we want them to? Or does that mean that we should go and try to literally reconfigure the earth's mountain ranges? Probably not. But Jesus did mean what he said. Faith really can move mountains in your life, and most of you know that this is true because you've experienced it firsthand. You've persevered through mountain-sized trials. Maybe you've overcome an addiction. Maybe you've endured through heavy losses even when it didn't make sense. God has done amazing things in your life if you have placed your faith in him. Yet all too often, we can forget these moments, can't we? When the mountaintop moments end and we enter into life's valleys, we can all forget what we've experienced through Christ. And if we're honest, in these moments, we can be tempted to look around for other sources of fulfillment, other things that we think will bring us life. And today, we're going to talk about that reality together. We're going to look at a moment in Israel's history when they struggled with that exact thing. They had forgotten all that God had done for them, and so they began to look around for other sources of life and provision. And it's my hope that as we look at this story together, as we look at the next mountain in our series, my hope is that we'll be reminded that Jesus is the only one who's worthy of our trust. That Jesus is the only one worth putting our faith in. That is what I hope we discover today. So if you have a Bible, go ahead and take it out and open up to 1 Kings chapter 18 with me. We're going to be looking at a passage that takes place on a mountain known as Mount Carmel. Now, Mount Carmel is a real mountain. It's in northern Israel near the Mediterranean Sea. Unfortunately, it has nothing to do with Carmel the candy, okay? As this important graphic makes clear, Carmel is the mountain, okay? Caramel is the candy. Now, I know some of you pronounce these two things in the same way. My wife is in that camp. She calls the candy caramel. But today, since I have the mic, I'm just going to throw out my hot take and say, you're all wrong, okay? If you say I'm craving Carmel, you're saying I am hungry for a mountain, okay? Just want to throw that out there for you. They said I get one dad joke per sermon, and so there you go. Mount Carmel is a real place, okay? And it's where one of the most epic showdowns of the entire Bible happens. If you grew up going to church, you've probably heard this story before, but it all begins with a king named Ahab. Okay, and Ahab was a terrible king. The Bible says in 1 Kings 16:33 that he did more to provoke the anger of the Lord than any of the other kings who went before him. Okay, so he made some terrible decisions, and one of those was that he decided to marry this woman named Jezebel, who was a priestess for the false god Baal. Okay, and if you grew up reading this story, it's possible that you pronounced the god Baal. That is totally fine. I think since he's not real, he's probably not going to get offended. So you can call him Baal if you want to, okay? But we're going to pronounce his name Baal today. Either way, Ahab marries this woman and begins to worship Baal along with these other false gods. And what's worse is he leads the entire nation of Israel to do the same thing. All right, and so this nation is headed down a really dark road. And it's into the midst of this reality that the Lord raises up a man, a prophet, named Elijah. Now, the Bible says Elijah was a Tishbite from Tishbe, which is like saying he's a nobody from nowhere, okay? He's described as sort of a nomad of sorts. And he shows up in this story pronouncing God's judgment against Ahab. He says that there is going to be a long drought, okay? And then he goes away for 3 years and experiences all of these things until God eventually sends him back to confront Ahab a second time. And that is where we're going to pick up in the story today. 1 Kings chapter 18, starting in verse 17. It says, "When Ahab saw him, he exclaimed, 'So is it really you, you troublemaker of Israel?' 'I've made no trouble for Israel,' Elijah replied. 'You and your family are the troublemakers, for you've refused to obey the commands of the Lord and have worshipped the images of Baal instead. Now summon all Israel to join me at Mount Carmel, along with the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah, who were supported by Jezebel.' So Ahab summoned all the people of Israel and the prophets to Mount Carmel. Then Elijah stood in front of them and said, 'How much longer will you waver, hobbling between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, then follow him.' But the people were completely silent." And I'm going to pause right there. We begin this chapter with a conflict, right? Elijah and Ahab are going back and forth over who brought this trouble upon Israel. Israel's in a bad spot. They're not doing so well as a nation. And so they're debating back and forth over whose fault it was, who is to blame. On the one hand, you have Ahab, who had welcomed in these false gods, right? The God of Moses had been sort of pushed into the background, and now they're looking for life and fulfillment and provision in these other places with these other gods. Now, to be clear, these weren't just nice, peaceful religious practices that were happening. They were dark, okay? The goddess Asherah was a fertility goddess. Oftentimes, Asherah worship involved temple prostitution. Many times, young girls would be sold against their will into this practice at a really young age, just horrible things. Baal worship usually brought with it other counterpart gods as well. One of the most well-known, his name was Molech, who demanded child sacrifice. I mean, just really dark stuff. When you read the details of what was actually taking place, it makes your stomach turn. And so I'm going to spare you those details today. But Elijah is there in the midst of it, and he's speaking out against it. He wants to remind people of the God of Moses, the one true God that they had grown up with. But he is accused of being the troublemaker. It's like he's this old curmudgeon that won't accept the new trends, right? He won't get with the times. And so they have this disagreement, and the entire nation is caught up in it. And they're summoned to the top of Mount Carmel, and Elijah calls them out, right? "How long will you waver," he says, "hobbling between two opinions?" Now, that word hobble is interesting there. Some translations say limp, others say struggle, but it's significant because it implies that if we refuse to make a choice in life, if we never decide which direction we're going to go, and instead we just try to accept everything as being true, then we miss out. It's like we're limping through life, never experiencing the joy of fully surrendering to the one true God. This is an easy mistake for all of us to make in modern day. It's easy to come to church and to say, "I believe in God," but then to leave and to go, "Yeah, but I also believe in all of these other things out in the world as well. I believe in God, but I also think I should fulfill every little desire and urge that I feel. I believe in God, but I also believe I need to go with the crowd in order to be accepted. I believe in God, but I also believe that I need to follow every new trend that I see becoming popular online." However it looks, we can be tempted to live these sort of double lives. And Elijah here is saying, when we live like this, it's like we're limping through life. We're hobbling when we were made to do so much more. And so he's trying to shake things up, all right? He's trying to get the attention of the Israelites here. Verse 22 says, "Then Elijah said to them, I'm the only prophet of the Lord who is left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Now bring 2 bulls." Okay, he's got an idea. He's going to plan this showdown in order to show the people what is true. Here's the terms. "Bring 2 bulls," he says. "The prophets of Baal may choose whichever one they wish and cut it into pieces and lay it on the wood of their altar without setting fire to it. I'll prepare the other bull and lay it on the wood of the altar and not set fire to it. Then call on the name of your God, and I'll call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by setting fire to the wood is the true God." And all of the people agreed. All right, so Elijah here, he plans this epic contest. He wants to prove once and for all which God is real. And the people agree to this because he gives them every advantage. Right? It's already 450 to 1. But he also says, you know what? We'll meet in your place of worship. We'll use your altar. And all that the God will have to do is they'll have to burn up some wood in a sacrifice. This was a huge advantage for them. Baal is supposed to be the god of the storm. Okay, so summoning a little lightning to burn up some wood would have been no problem for them. Okay, they have every advantage. So yes, they agree to the terms of this showdown. Let's keep reading. Verse 25 says, "Then Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, 'You go first, for there are many of you.'" He gives them yet another advantage. He says, "Choose one of the bulls and prepare it and call on the name of the Lord your God, but don't set fire to the wood." So they prepared one of the bulls, placed it on the altar, and then they called on the name of Baal from morning until noontime, shouting, "O Baal, answer us." But there was no reply of any kind. Then they danced, hobbling around the altar that they made. About noontime, Elijah began mocking them. "You'll have to shout louder," he scoffed, "for surely he is a god. Perhaps he is daydreaming or relieving himself, or maybe he's just away on a trip or asleep and needs to be wakened." And so they shouted louder. And following their normal custom, they cut themselves with knives and swords until the blood gushed out. They raved all afternoon until the time of the evening sacrifice, but still there was no sound, no reply, no response. Wow. I mean, what a scene, right? We see there's this escalation happening of what the followers of Baal have to do in order to get their God's attention. And it starts really simple. They start just by calling out to Baal, "Oh Baal, listen to us." But there's no answer. And so they up the stakes, right? Then they begin to dance around the altar that they made, and they continue to shout for a long time, at which point Elijah starts to mock them. Okay, sidebar, mockery, usually not a great approach when we're trying to reach people, okay? You might gain a following that way, but it's typically not the way to go. And here, what we see happening is things start to escalate, okay? Things get a whole lot worse. They go to a whole new level, and the prophets of Baal begin to harm themselves like they normally would with knives and swords until the blood gushed out. It's this gruesome image that we see, and I think it's supposed to show us this progression that can take place when we allow a created thing in life to become an ultimate thing. When we allow a created thing to take the place of the creator, there is this progression, okay? Idolatry is simply when we allow something that's not God to become a God in our life. It can be a bad thing, or it can be a good thing that we allow to take that place in our life. You may not have an actual altar in your home with a physical idol on it, but if you think that you don't have to watch out for idols in your life, then you are kidding yourself. Money, power, beauty, success. All of these things have spiritual influence over our lives, and if we don't keep them in check, they can enslave us. They can demand more and more and more. It begins with a little of our time. Then more sacrifice is required for more attention to reach that next milestone of success. And before we know it, we're making choices we never thought we'd make that are harmful to ourselves and others in the name of whatever it might be. This is why for some people, work is just a part of life. But for other people, it becomes all of life. Some will sacrifice and bleed for their careers. Some will beat themselves down in the pursuit of beauty. Some will make moral compromises and dance all around, right, in the pursuit of gaining more followers. However it looks, the point is, idolatry is just as much a reality in our world today as it was for ancient Israel. We need to watch for this progression happening in our lives. All right, and so we see Elijah here. He's trying to show these people and us that there is a better way. Okay, so let's keep reading. Verse 30, it says, "Then Elijah called to the people, 'Come over here.' They all crowded around him as he repaired the altar of the Lord that had been torn down. See, the place where that Baal altar was originally an altar for the God of Israel. It says he took 12 stones, one to represent each of the tribes of Israel, and he used the stones to rebuild the altar in the name of the Lord. Then he dug a trench around the altar large enough to hold about 3 gallons. He piled wood on the altar and cut the bull into pieces and laid it on the wood. Then he said, 'Fill 4 large jars with water and pour water over the offering of wood.'" He's making things more difficult for himself. He's soaking the wood with water. After he had done this, he said, "Do the same thing again." And when they finished, he said, "Now do it a 3rd time." And they did as he said, and the water ran around the altar and even filled the trench. Elijah is increasing his disadvantage here. See, the real God doesn't need ideal conditions to work. In fact, he tends to work best when the odds are stacked against him. And some of us need to realize this. We get so down on ourselves, we think, man, there is no way at this point in my life that God could ever use me. I've gone too far down the wrong road, but we forget that we serve an unlimited God. He can set fire to wet wood. Okay, if you feel like your life is drenched with sin, guilt, shame, regret, whatever it might be, I want you to know this doesn't deter God from you. He specializes in situations just like that. Just like water attracts lightning, it's a conductor, I think is the word. Your guilt and your shame could be a conductor for the grace of God. What if instead of chasing after these other things in life to fulfill us, what if instead we let God set our hearts on fire for him once again? Let's see what happens in the rest of this passage. Verse 36. At the time for offering the evening sacrifice, Elijah the prophet walked up to the altar and prayed, "O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, prove today that you are God in Israel and that I am your servant. Prove that I've done all this at your command. O Lord, answer me, answer so that these people will know that you, O Lord, are God and that you have brought them back to yourself." Notice the simplicity of his prayer here. There's no fancy dancing around, no shouting, nothing like that. It's simple. That is all it takes for us to call out to God. It says, immediately the fire of the Lord flashed down from heaven and burned up the young bull, the wood, the stones, and the dust. It even licked up all the water in the trench. And when all the people saw it, they fell face down to the ground and cried out, "The Lord, he is God. Yes, the Lord is God." Then Elijah commanded, "Seize all the prophets of Baal. Don't let a single one escape." So the people seized them all, and Elijah took them down to the Kishon Valley and killed them there. Whoa. I mean, this is an intense story. This has everything in it that middle school boys love, right? It's got fire, killing, blood, and trash talk, okay? It's got it all. If you think that the Bible is boring, you probably just haven't read enough of it yet. Okay, because we see here an epic display of God's power. And what I want to point out from it is that as the fire flashes down from heaven, while it could have consumed the entire nation, it could have consumed everybody there, it doesn't. Yeah, the prophets of Baal are brought to justice. In a theocratic state, this is what was to be done, right? Elijah had to carry out this law to protect the nation of Israel from all the terrible things that these prophets were doing. And so he does that. We don't live in a theocracy now, so that wouldn't be right for us to do. But this was the reality for them. And so the prophets of Baal are struck down. But what about everybody else? Really, if you think about it, everyone had ignored God for a season. Everyone had sinned. They'd all broken the law, so why didn't they experience judgment? Why doesn't lightning just consume everybody in a moment? The answer is because God wanted these people to turn back to him. We're seeing a foreshadowing here of the gospel, a glimpse of God's patience. In 2 Peter 3:9, we read that the Lord is not slow to fulfill his promise, as some count slowness, but is patient toward you, not wishing that any should perish, but that all should reach repentance. See, yes, God is going to carry out his judgment against all evil and all sin in the world. He is going to make everything right again. But we live in a window of time, this sliver of a moment where God is allowing things to play out so as many people as possible can have the chance to turn to him and be saved. I had a seminary professor who explained it to me like this. Imagine the Old West. All right, there was a time where people would get around in these wagons being pulled by horses, okay? And at times, folks would have to cross these really large fields that were full of dried grass. And occasionally, some of the grass would catch fire, which is really dangerous when you're in a slow-moving wagon. All right, so what people would do is when they would see the smoke coming in the distance, they would do a controlled burn nearby. They would burn an area of grass and then put it out. So when the larger fire drew near, they could stand on the ground that had already been burned to avoid getting caught up in the flames. Whether we know it or not, we have all been a part of starting a wildfire. A fire that's causing devastation on God's good creation. It's called sin, all right? It surrounds us in the world and it lives inside of all of us. And the only way that we will escape these flames is to stand on the ground that's already been burned. Jesus is the ground we stand on. Jesus has already been burned for us, right? The sacrifice that's burned up here on the altar at Mount Carmel, it points to his sacrifice. The scriptures teach that he willingly laid down his life on the cross. He absorbed the wrath of God, becoming the sacrifice so you and me could be saved. The shortest summary of the gospel I've ever heard is just 4 words: Jesus in my place. That is the good news for all of us this morning, that because God has consumed the sacrifice of Jesus, we don't have to be consumed. So I don't know where you're at today in terms of your faith, but wherever you find yourself, I just want you to hear this. It is not too late. You can turn back to Jesus. You can make adjustments in your life to bring him back to the center where he is meant to be. You see, just like this contest that took place on Mount Carmel happened, there is a contest taking place for your heart. Other things in our world are constantly competing for your worship, and sometimes things that are not God can creep onto the throne of our hearts. But know this, while every other God, when they do that, while every other God will say, spill more of your blood for me, bleed for me, the God of the Bible has already bled for you. An idol of money will say, you need more of me to live your best life. The God of the Bible gave up his riches so that in his poverty, we might become spiritually rich. A God of career will say, give me all of your time, and then you'll find significance. Jesus says, come to me, and I'll give you rest. You see, when we really see the God of the Bible in comparison to the other stuff we get caught up chasing after, really there's no contest. It's an easy choice. The question is, how long will you waver? How long will you waver between 2 opinions, limping through life, hobbling when Jesus is right there with arms open wide, waiting for you and for me? What might you need to change today in order to bring him back to the center of your life?